Hi, Maria.
Hi.
Hello. This is my friend Maria. So it's a bit different to the first one where I didn't actually know Zach, but I thought that Maria would be someone great to talk to, and I'm really pleased you're here.
Thank you. I'm very pleased to be here as well.
So Maria is a student at the University of Leeds. That's where we met. Just finishing off her sociology degree now. So yeah, I've just seen that you're finished your dissertation, which must be a big relief.
Yeah, it was incredible. It feels like an entire weight has been lifted off me. Very special feeling. I don't think I've ever felt something quite like it. Really strange. Yeah.
I'm so glad to hear it. So on to the first question then. So this is quite a broad one, so take it how you will, but how have you been affected by mental health?
Um, so I think something really important needs to be said about the notion of mental health, because mental health typically should be referring to a healthy mind, right?
Mm.
So the way that I feel like I've been affected by it is that some obstruction due to life and emotional circumstances came to condition my mind somehow, to the point to which it led to an ill health somehow. Basically, I suffered an eating disorder that started at the age of 12 approximately. And ever since that kind of creeped in, it's always been present. Luckily, I have recovered from the strain that it was imposing itself on me. But something that is important to recognize is that once something like that happens, it stays forever somehow. So the way that I've been affected by mental health, I would say, is just situations in my life have made it so that my mind has become fragile and vulnerable to exterior influences and exterior situations and adversities that have been imposed on me somehow without my choosing somehow, I'd say.
Yeah, I think that's definitely important to mention, that it's never a choice, and you know, it's a really complex thing, and I think with each mental illness there are so many different factors that can contribute, whether or not, you know, they're environmental or genetic sometimes, or you know, emotional. There's so many factors, and I think each person has like such a unique mix of what, you know, what happens to them. Would you mind talking a bit more about how the eating disorder affected your life, or any of the kind of experiences?
So basically, at the age of 13, obviously it's the adolescent years where you are kind of going through this phase where your body's changing, you know, hormones are altering, you're becoming, you know, what many people say, you're becoming a woman, you know, your body develops from a child's body to more female body, you know. Many girls get their menstruation during this time and things like that. So I noticed my body changing in this way in comparison to other girls. And because of situations that were going on at home and in my private life, a family member died and things like that, I was kind of feeling this extreme sadness that I didn't know how to deal with. Yet I found that recurring to controlling my food and controlling my body, I could find some sort of solace in that. So as my body was kind of changing, and I would still see girls, you know, looking thin, and I would be comparing myself a lot, you know, I found that eventually all the efforts I was putting into my body, they could show that I could feel good, you know, I could feel okay. Obviously, it's not actually okay. It was an okay that made me kind of, it was like a sedative thing, you know, like a kind of way for me to deal with serious emotion. So yeah, the way that it would manifest would just be extreme exercise and a lot of control over my food intake. So certain practices that would make me lose weight very quickly. And yeah, eventually, you know, my family members started noticing this, and they said it was a big problem, you know. My mom, she wouldn't see me for about a month over the summer when I would spend time elsewhere, and I would come back and she said, wow, this is not good, you know. And, you know, my hair was kind of losing its color at one point, you know, and I was in this kind of web of just the illusion of wanting to keep losing weight, you know. And it was constant and it would never leave. And so yeah, I was sent to a therapist who valued that my eating disorder wasn't too extreme to have me in like going to like group therapy and more intensive therapy. So it was like about 2 years of this kinds of therapy, just with one nutritionist and a therapist once a week or once a month, depending on the severity. And then eventually, when I was in my, I think, the year that I graduated from high school, so like the last year, you know, when everyone's studying for their GCSEs and that stuff, my equivalent in the American school here at Barcelona, I was told by my therapist, who I had had for like 2 years or something, she said, Maria, this is the time you really need to go to more intensive therapy, because I was kind of managing it, you know, and sort of going from one state of wellness to another, and then, you know, certain things would happen in my personal life which would allow me to perhaps manage the eating disorder better, but then other moments it would just get worse, you know. So eventually I had to go into more intensive therapy for several months. I didn't have to like sleep there or anything, but I had to do it alongside my school somehow. So yeah.
Yeah, I think the two things, all of what you said was really insightful and really, really helpful. So thank you for that. But I think the thing about severity is interesting, because obviously severity can mean so many different things. And I just wondering if you had any thoughts about that with eating disorders, because I know there's a lot of criticism of like people being told they're not severe enough and for intensive therapy. And have you got any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, it was a bit difficult for some family members to kind of realize that I was having this. For example, someone told me once, they were like, oh, I was trying to explain that I was in the moment that I had to go to more intensive therapy and like spend like hours and hours in a center. I told this to a family member, and the family member said, I don't get it. I don't understand, because it's not visible. You know, have you ever vomited before? And it was like, it's just, you know, obviously I forgive that person for not knowing, you know, exactly what this is all about. Like, I can't expect anyone to, you know, but it just represents how society doesn't see eating disorders as being a lot more complex than the visible things of it. So for example, you know, people can only think of someone who is, you know, someone who is obese, they would say, oh no, they have a problem, or someone who is extremely thin, no, they have an eating disorder. But whatever's in between is like, no, you know. So the body is definitely not an indicator of the state of mental health, and especially the mental health within an eating disorder, you know. I mean, it's there's nothing that actually can be, there's no exterior indicator whatsoever, you know. The only exterior indicator is when obviously you can tell someone is on one extreme, but that even that shouldn't even be an indicator. It's the mental health of the person, you know. And the problem is, like, when you're not able to share that, you know, because in society, you know, we're not told that we need to be expressive of how we feel, of what we think, you know. We're always, it's more likely than not that we're conditioned to just keep going and continue, you know. And that's the perfect recipe for an eating disorder of the style that I personally had, you know. There's many different types, but like one where it's very restrictive, where you just need to keep going and keep going, you can very easily become addicted to the functionality of it, you know. And the ease, it actually even becomes more easy to kind of work hard on your body and work hard on keeping the mind active than not stopping, you know. Yeah, sorry, I've been going on a massive rant.
No, that's really important, because I think that definitely is a message that isn't shared enough about. And even I think there's kind of misconceptions, even I think within the medical world, of how eating disorders should be diagnosed. And I think that I've struggled myself with forms of disordered eating, and I think that often you can try and open up about that and someone can be quite dismissive, if that's a GP or, you know, whoever, because they don't see it necessarily. And I think that, and also with you said, with what you said about being up and down, I think that the journey's not linear, like the recovery or the actual, sometimes even the actual illness. As you said, you had periods of time where you felt quite like highly functioning, and that other parts of your life maybe allowed it to be a bit more balanced, and then other points where you were a lot more vulnerable to it. So I think, that was really, really, I think, important, because I think some people think it's just this one way of being, one way of recovering, but there's so many realities.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, you know, when I was there in that center, it really opened my eyes. You know, personally, it was very revolutionary, because I was able to overcome what I was going through, and I finally obtained the strength to really confront what I was experiencing. But apart from that, I mean, I learned about the plenty dimensions that eating disorders can take, you know, and how it affects young people as well, because I was surrounded particularly by young people. There's a lot of different age groups, that obviously treatment, it varies amongst how old you are, you know, depending on your lifestyle and things. And it just was very surprising to me how it doesn't even have to do with eating as much. It's just really the sensation or the emotions that have been cultivating within you, and that conditioning, be it from an exterior influence, be it from maybe a neural mechanism that just doesn't permit you to you know, gather enough hormones to feel okay, or, you know, things like that. There's so many different things that can influence a behavior, or one thing, you know, and people become so attached to the negative behavior that has been cultivated through an eating disorder, through any kind of mental health issue, you know. And that's the thing, it just demonstrates that everyone lives like a mental illness or a mental ill health in a very different way, you know. And it's really wrong to kind of associate an eating disorder with anorexic girl, full stop, you know. Like, there's guys who have eating disorders too, you know. There's like, and the exterior body does not indicate like the degree to which or severity of an eating disorder, you know. And this also ties a lot into like that all bodies are different, everyone has imperfections, you know. Like, it's all about acceptance, really. It really is. Yeah.
So out of those many you know, insights, what do you think would be one of the most important things, if you can specify, to have heard earlier? Like, you know, if there were, or maybe a few messages to younger people of all genders who might,
so basically, because an eating disorder in particular it doesn't see anything, it doesn't see gender, it doesn't see, and no mental health issue does, you know. In the end, it just has its way of coming to you, and then it's there, it's present inside of you. Basically, what I was taught in that center, one of the most essential things is that an eating disorder is like an iceberg. So basically, the tip of the iceberg is the only thing that you see, but below it, there's like 4 times that, which lies below the surface. I'll send you a photo of it. There's like so many diagrams, and it's a really cool way of thinking about it, because the tip of the iceberg is just nothing, you know. It's like, it's just what you see, what other people see. It's the eating habits that people can identify, the body, and little else, you know. That's what people think all an eating disorder really is. But below the surface is all the things that have put you to live that have led you to live an eating disorder or any kind of mental health condition. And that's what you need to confront. Sorry, there's kids like playing around. Yeah, and basically what I want to say that is the most important, I think, with any kind of mental health condition is understanding what has led to that, you know? And really, it's a matter of digging deep. It's like going far into your psyche, your past, and it's really tough. So sorry. But you really need to like take your time and give yourself the space and the chance and everything. Well, at least they're having fun.
Yeah, someone's having fun. But I think that, not that I'm not having fun, it's really, really insightful. I think that, like you said, there's always so many reasons, and there's so many, if not reasons, because I think some people with mental illnesses do find it difficult to know why. Like for me, I didn't really know what had caused it. And I think that a lot of people don't. It might be, there's so many different factors, but I think the important thing, like you said, is that there's such like so much more to these mental illnesses than what like maybe the media or kind of society views as the mental illness. I think that it's often physical, like I said in the last one with OCD, like often the compulsions and the very physical compulsions rather than the mental compulsions and habits or like internal distress and intrusive thoughts. And I think it's somewhat similar with eating disorders in that it's often portrayed as this very like, yeah, visible thing that we've spoken about in the media, and there's not much about, or not as much about the complexity within. So I guess this might be helpful for anyone who has struggled with disordered eating or kind of anything to do with this, who feels like they didn't fit the right kind of criteria to get help or to express their struggle because they didn't fit the box. So I guess it's important for us all to kind of look at our habits and whether they're actually like, whether they're fulfilling us and whether they're like making us happy or not. Because even outside of disordered eating, I see a lot of like health influencers talking about calories, and there's a lot of this, especially during coronavirus. And I don't know, for me the helpful thing has been trying to move away from worrying about the body and just looking more at like within, like you said, because I think there's a lot of like healthy health stuff and exercise stuff that's fueled by a lot of stigma as well.
Yeah, I mean, so basically, well, firstly, society has a severe obsession with thinness. That is, it's very problematic for people, especially who struggle with eating disorders. That is not to say that people who are naturally thin, you know, that is their natural state, you know, and that's not a problem. But the problem is when people try to achieve that standard, and that standard is a lot of times airbrushed. It's very unnatural. It's, you know, it's very problematic. Like I've lived it firsthand, and it's a massive struggle. And even people who don't necessarily qualify, you know, for having an eating disorder, or in medical terms make it to therapy or whatever, it's internalized by practically everybody, you know. It's everywhere, this notion of thinness, and of, then the worst part is then calorie counting and all that influence from the media and all kinds of companies trying to sell you products to lose weight, to, you know, to exercise and to count your calories, and like all these tracking apps and things like that. Like, it's important to realize that although, you know, that may be helpful for some people, for other people, and for a lot of people, it's a massive strain. It's like an incredible trigger, you know. So what needs to be done about this is basically finding a balance between preserving your healthy lifestyle, your, you know, having a good life and being happy more than anything, you know, and eating, because the problem with eating disorders in particular is that it concerns something that you're ingesting and that you need to survive, you know. And that's what makes, not to say either that like other mental health conditions, you know, aren't as important, because all kinds of mental health issues are important, but with eating disorders it's particularly a strong one, because you it's like what you eat, you know, and if you don't eat, you don't live, you know. Eventually, you know, I've heard of people who have passed away because of this, you know, and that doesn't get said enough, that it's really serious, and every kind of thing is really serious. And it's important to really see how important to prioritize the mind and just being happy. Being happy is the most important thing. So the most important like thing to do is to figure out how you're going to be happy, and whatever it takes, just do it. And that's what I did eventually. And you know, so basically now during quarantine everything can resurface because you can't move, you're not, you know, busy with your daily life and your active mind and whatever. So for me personally, you know, even though I've finished everything I needed to finish, you know, I'm not even going to therapy anymore, you know, I still feel it, you know. There's this little like demon inside that says like, oh, watch out, or it tells me to be cautious and things like that. And the task is daily. It's a daily thing. It can come up whenever, and it just stays with you forever. And I've heard of people who have had it from their adolescence and even to their late years, 40s, 50s, they still live with it every single day. So you can make one choice or another. One choice is to continue feeding it and live like that forever, which is a really horrible way to live because you're only going to continue making it worse. Or you really confront it and you deal with the difficulties. And it's been incredibly tough, but it's so worth it. I cannot stress enough how worth it is, really.
I'm so proud of you, and thank you so much for sharing that with us. I think that's a really good note to close up on, and I think it's given everyone a lot of food for thought. Pardon the pun, but I think that has given everyone a lot to think about, and I think it's especially important during this time where food has been a big topic, and kind of I think, and what, like you said, on our own a lot, in our own heads. And I think I've heard for a lot of people, and myself to a certain extent, it has resurfaced a little bit. And just think dealing with that, like we spoke about, like recovery and kind of, for anything is not linear. And like if old habits or old ways of thinking are resurfacing, it's okay to like acknowledge that and do what you can to help yourself and reach out to others. Don't think like, oh, my thing was in the past, I'm going to be a burden on other people. Just stay open as much as you can.
And if I may say one other thing, I know there's a lot of messages, but I think another really important aspect of recovery and of preserving your mental health and, you know, just taking care is to choose what influences you expose yourself to. For example, social media. Watch out with what you're seeing, what you also consume, because, you know, the more you consume things that value thin and unnatural bodies, you know, and it's a serious matter. So it's like, you know, I now have turned to so many body positivity pages, and on Instagram, like it used to be one thing, and then I made it a complete new kind of site of influence, because in the end that's what it is, you know. Social media has a major impact on our lives. So I think it's really important to follow some body positivity movements and you know, any kind of page that just shows that all bodies are valid, you know. Like it really doesn't matter what's on the outside, doesn't matter at all. Like the most important is what's inside of you. And like if you're well with yourself, everything will change. I think. Yeah,
I think that's so important with the social media, and like there's so much fat phobia out there, and I think it's so ingrained in so much of like what's considered common sense and considered normal in our society. So much of the value in and glamorizing thinness is inherently fat phobic, and I think that's obviously a matter that needs to be spoke about more deeply on another episode and really considered, because I think that is just so important. But like you said, I think for me as well, like changing my Instagram following, what I'm following is now so different to what it used to be. Like I'll unfollow something if I can see that it's unhealthy or triggering any way. And I have so many, like I literally just want everyone to follow all these amazing accounts because I just think that they help me so much. It's sometimes like free therapy, like on my Instagram feed. So I think you can make a massive difference in what, like you said, what you're digesting and what you're taking in, and exposed on social media is so important. Not to sound like a middle-aged mum who's like, Instagram is dangerous, but like it really can be. So like change who you're following.
Yeah, and also, you know, lucky enough for me, you know, becoming your friend, for example, was an amazing experience, because it just opened me up to, you know, I remember in the early days of our friendship, we were talking so much about our mental health and just talking so explicitly about everything. And it was incredible for me to realize that, you know, social relationships can be something so much more than just superficial. I don't mean to disregard any kind of, you know, friendship groups or whatever, but like what I'm saying is it's so good to have a good support network, you know, and you can know that whenever you need help, there's always someone, you know, and supporting each other is essential. And for those out there who might be a bit afraid of like sharing, it's so worth it, you know, although sometimes some people will not be as receptive, then it's okay, because that's how we've been taught to be, you know, so we can't blame anyone for being conditioned by society. We all are. So the best thing is just to stick to the people who love you unconditionally, really.
And nourish you and make you like, you know, feel accepted, I think. And when they don't, you know, leaving that behind. But yeah, meeting you was such a blessing in my life too. So thank you for that. And thank you for being on here today.
Thank you so much, Marque.